A soft breeze washed over the night, blowing strands of the warrior's pure white hair into his face. The smoldering ruins of Dern reflected dully in his jet-black eyes as he peered down below. Columns of smoke were rising into the darkness of the sky, the nauseating odor of burning flesh permeating from them as they partially blocked one of the twins from view, two moons that orbited the planet. The only sign of emotion came from the warrior's fist clenching. "Their time will come to an end soon, friend." The barely audible voice came from behind. A man an inch or two shorter, with the same white hair tied back neatly. His eyes were a dark, steely gray. Indeed. The warriors turned from the cliff's edge. They knew better than any. War was on the horizon. Daniel sat in the back of the classroom, listening to his anatomy teacher drone on about the importance of the final exams that he'd been prepared for weeks. He laid his head down on the desk and stared out of the window into the school's courtyard, his long black hair cascading down behind him. How much longer before he quits talking? "Is there a problem, Mr. Wise?" his teacher asked, as if hearing Daniel's thoughts. "No, sir," Daniel said, sitting up. "Sorry." His teacher sighed. "At least you know the material," he admitted under his breath. The bell rang and the students began grabbing their bags and heading for the door. "Alright, guys, don't forget to study. Half of you don't even know what I'm talking about up here." Daniel grabbed his textbook and exited the classroom. The hallways were just as chaotic as they always were. He made his way down the hall. The racket was giving him a headache. Finally making it to his locker, he grabbed his bag and slipped his anatomy book back in its place. He was glad his senior year was coming to a close. "Hey, Daniel," his best friend's voice greeted from behind. He spun around. Catherine was waiting, clutching her books to her chest. "Hey," he replied. "So are we still hanging out tomorrow?" she asked, pushing some strands of her blonde hair behind her ear. "Of course. Why wouldn't we be?" he asked, slinging his bag over his shoulder. Catherine smiled. "I don't know. I was just checking." "It's your birthday, Catherine. I wouldn't dream of missing it," Daniel reassured her, closing his locker. "Come on, I can walk you home." The two of them made their way out of the school's back doors and into the afternoon sun. Daniel took a deep breath and sighed as they walked down the clean sidewalk towards the street. The fresh air always revitalized him after a boring day stuck in classrooms. "So, how do you think you'll do on the exams next week?" he asked, subconsciously counting the number of cracks in the sidewalk as they walked over them. "Ugh, let's not talk about exams. I'm stressing over them enough as it is." Daniel laughed. As they attempted to cross the street to leave the school grounds, a car careened around the corner, coming to a screeching halt just in front of them. Daniel snatched Catherine back by her arm, saving her from being hit. "Hey, want a ride?" a voice asked. The passenger window rolled down to about halfway, loud rock music filling the air. "Mark?" Catherine shouted, bewildered. "You almost hit me. What's your problem?" she screamed. "You're fine. Do you want to ride or not?" "No, I don't want to ride," Catherine snapped, almost cutting Mark off. "Daniel's offered to walk me home and he's more than capable of doing so." Mark glared at Daniel before finally screeching his tires as he took off down the road. "Are you alright?" Daniel asked, watching Mark drive away. Catherine sighed. "Yeah. I swear, though, he just doesn't get it," she began as they continued across the street. "We only went on one date. That was months ago." Daniel couldn't help but laugh again as she continued to rant about how irritating Mark has been. A few minutes later, they were coming up to Catherine's house. "Alright, Daniel, don't forget. In the park, at 4, under the tree," Catherine teased. "Don't worry. I'll be there," he smiled. "Okay." Then I'll see you tomorrow. Daniel watched Catherine walk up her driveway and open the door before walking away. When he got to his house, he noticed that his mother was home from work. "I'm home," he called as he shut the front door behind him. "We're in here." He put his shoes in the closet and made his way into the kitchen. Both his mother and his sister were sitting at the kitchen table having some lunch. "Welcome home. How was school?" his mother asked, tying back her long, dark brown curls. "It was fine," Daniel stated. "Why aren't you at work?" "I'm glad to see you too," his mother said with a wry smile. She got up from the table and put her dishes in the sink. "You know what I mean," Daniel persisted. His mother smiled. "I know. Well," she began, "I was let go." Daniel began to think about places he could apply. "Don't you even think about it," she said, knowing all too well what her son was doing. "I've already gotten another job. They said I can start tomorrow." "I can help," Daniel said. "It's about time I get a job anyways." "Daniel," his mother began, "I'm plenty capable of taking care of you and your sister on my own." "I don't need your help." She smiled at her son and gave him a hug. "I appreciate the offer, but I can handle it." She looked him in the eyes and her features melted into a loving glow. Daniel knew that her soft brown eyes were looking right through him. He turned away and went upstairs, leaving his mother with a brief feeling of loss. "Mom, you hurt his feelings when you do that," Emily said. She looked at her daughter. "What?" "You know what," Emily said with patience. "When you look at Daniel, it's like you don't even see him anymore. Instead, you're seeing someone that hasn't been here for years." "It's not that simple," Miss Wise countered, keeping her anger in check. "I know it isn't," Emily said, raising her voice. She looked away from her mother, regretting the tone she had just used. "But you don't seem to understand how it makes Daniel feel," she said softly. Miss Wise began to wash her dishes, and Emily finished her lunch, both of them feeling ashamed. Daniel placed his bag against the wall near his door and walked over to his dresser to grab some clothes. He didn't need a shower. He had just taken one that morning, but he needed a distraction. He put his clothes on the counter and then turned the water on. He stood there for a moment, listening to the sound of the water hit the tub. The young man staring back at him in the mirror had striking blue eyes, different shades of mesmerizing indigo and teal twisting and weaving from the depths of his pupils. Daniel ran his hand through his thick black hair, gritting his teeth in frustration. He could hear his mother's voice in his head. "Sometimes I swear I can see your father staring at me through your eyes." "I'm not my father," he said, glaring at himself. Taking off his clothes, he got in the shower and stood beneath the icy, cold water. Something about the numbing cold relaxed him. When he finally got out, he went downstairs and put his dirty clothes in the washer before heading to the garage. Daniel began to stretch, taking a seat on his weight bench as he did. Afterwards, he laid back and began his workout. The side door opened about an hour later, and his mother was standing in the doorway. "I thought I'd find you out here." Daniel put his weights down and sat up. "What's up?" he asked. His mother sat down on the steps that led to the door. "I should be asking you the same thing." "I'm fine," he replied, catching his breath. "Daniel," his mother stammered, trying to find her words. I do see you. Please don't think that I'm taking who you are for granted. You're my son, and I love you, and I hate hurting your feelings. But there's no way I can ignore how much you look like your father, how much you remind me of him." Daniel sighed. "I understand. I really do. I know that you really loved him." His mother smiled and wiped away the tears beginning to build in her eyes. She stood up and walked over to her son. "I love you, Daniel," she said, kissing the top of his head. "You'll never have to worry about that." Daniel laughed, shaking his head. "I know. I love you too, Mom." His mother pushed a strand of his sweaty hair behind his ear affectionately. "Dinner will be ready in about half an hour, okay?" she said, turning to go back inside. The rest of the day was slow. There wasn't much said at dinner either. It was only 8 o'clock, but Daniel was already lying down in his bed with the lights off, and it didn't take long for him to drift off into a dream-filled sleep. He was running down a sidewalk, shoving people out of his way. He looked over his shoulder to see Catherine right behind him with her hand in his, fear etched into every feature of her tear-stained face. Just a couple of yards behind them was a giant black mask with gleaming yellow eyes. The man was completely masked in shadow, and his face was hidden by a large black veil wrapped around his head. In front of them, Daniel saw that a semi-truck had pulled up, blocking their path. He made a left and found himself in an alley. It was a long stretch, littered with trash, dumpsters, and fire escapes covered in rust. Daniel's legs burned, and each and every breath felt like it was being ripped from his lungs. He could hear his and Catherine's feet making contact with the wet cement, echoing all around them with small hollow splashes. Daniel looked back to see the man still hot on their trail. Daniel made another left, and to his disbelief, found himself face to face with a dead end. He turned around and saw the man moving towards them. Daniel grabbed Catherine and pulled her back. The stench of rotting trash filled his nostrils, and suddenly, the giant rushed forward, and Daniel was swallowed by the darkness. Daniel woke with a start, a cold sweat drenching his body. His head was throbbing. He was breathing heavily, and his muscles burned. The alarm clock on his nightstand showed that it was just after 2. He tried to go back to sleep, but it wasn't easy. He woke up around 9, and despite all the sleep he'd gotten, he still felt exhausted. Daniel got dressed and went downstairs to fix some breakfast. There was a note on the fridge from his mother. "I'm heading to work, and I'm dropping your sister off at a friend's house on the way. She should be home around 3 to 3:30. Love you, Mom." Daniel sat down at the table with his food, but pushed it away after looking at it for a while. He didn't have an appetite. He laid his head down and just sat there. Something was wrong. He walked to the sink to rinse his face and took a long drink of the cold water, hoping it would help. After that, he forced a few bites of his breakfast down. He wasn't going to miss Catherine's birthday. Maybe some fresh air and some sunlight would do me some good. Locking up before he left, Daniel decided to walk around the block a few times. The sunlight helped, but something still felt terribly off. He went to the only place that ever helped, his weight bench. Daniel worked out for hours, but never seemed to lose his stamina. Emily came into the garage from outside and was surprised when she saw Daniel still there. "Aren't you supposed to be gone?" she asked. "What are you talking about?" he asked, confused. "You were supposed to meet Catherine, right?" Daniel tore out of the garage, cursing as he ran past his neighbor's house. Time had gone by so quickly. What's wrong with me? I've completely lost it today. There was something haunting him, and it was in the back of his mind, but he couldn't get a fix on what it was or why it was there. He stopped to try and at least get a fix on where he was. "Daniel? Where do you think you're running off to?" Catherine asked. She was standing about 10 feet behind him, with a look of confusion in her green eyes. Her long brown skirt was gently riding the breeze. She wore a white lace blouse with a carrying bag hanging neatly from her shoulder. Daniel noticed more than anything that her usual free-flowing dark blonde hair was tied back today. Catherine walked towards Daniel and stopped just in front of him, searching his blue eyes for a moment. "You weren't avoiding me, were you?" she finally asked, breaking the short silence. "No, of course not. I lost track of time. I'm sorry," he confessed, panting. Catherine stared at him a moment through squinted eyes. "Well, when you ran past the park, you surprised me. I wasn't exactly sure what you were up to, so I decided to come and see for myself," she explained, sizing them up. Daniel noticed the entrance to the park behind Catherine. I've been kind of out of it today. Mm-hmm, she said, a smile crossing her lips. Come on, I'll show you where the park is. Daniel sighed, smiling. So, how's your day been so far? It's been good, Catherine replied with some newfound hop in her step. My parents took me to a few places, then we stopped at home to have some cake. Then they dropped me off here, and I waited under the tree, she said, nodding towards the tree where they were now standing. But you never came. I looked around to see if maybe you had gone to wait somewhere else, and that's when I saw you run by. She set her bag down and knelt beside it. A moment later, she pulled out a pair of tennis shoes and placed them to the side. Daniel, you don't mind going to see a movie, do you? Not at all, he replied almost instantly. Do you know when it starts? Yep, I checked this morning before we left. It starts at 4:30, so after I get these on, we'll need to hurry. Okay. Catherine watched Daniel from the corner of her eyes while she changed her shoes. To say the least, she had a bit of a crush on him. She didn't know when she first realized it or when it had happened, but what she did know was that she was crazy about him. She stood up and grabbed Daniel's hand. Let's go, she said, grinning. The two made it to the sidewalk a few moments later and looked around. They were taken by surprise when they noticed that the roads and even the walkways were completely empty. That's strange, Daniel said, looking around. I've never seen it like this. Neither have I, Catherine replied, pausing. There's nobody in the park now that I'm actually looking either. It's eerie. Yeah, I agree, he said, looking up at the sky. The clouds were jumbled together in monstrous proportion. Some were darker shades of gray, while others were dull greens. That looks like quite a storm. Maybe that's why. Catherine looked up at the incoming front. Yeah, we'd better get going before we get caught in the middle of it. With that, they began to run towards the theater,